kind of stuck with me because you can hang out with somebody and go golf and go to a game or whatever and hang out. But at the end of the day, if you don't have the ability to listen and have solutions that are creating value, that's just a buddy.
Welcome to Corporate Competitor, presented by Forbes Books, the podcast where executives share how the lessons they learned playing sports shaped their leadership. With me for today's episode is PNC Financial Services Group Regional President Cressman Bronson. As a walk-on athlete at the University of Toledo, he joined both the baseball and track teams, gaining lasting lessons in resilience and hard work that continue to shape his leadership today. We'll talk about how athletics influenced his path, how a single phone call changed his career, and why he believes the best leaders are great listeners. Now make sure to check out corporatecompetitorpodcast.com/notes for my favorite quotes and reflection questions to help you apply today's insights. Cressman, thanks for joining us.
Don, it's a pleasure to see you again, and I'm really digging the all the memorabilia in the background.
I think we had a podcast guest a couple of years ago who actually said it looked like I robbed a Fanatics store behind me, but it's a lifetime of gear, right? Things that show up, so it's all good. I want to start with a story that you've shared, and I know you and I had some great conversations around your career and some of the things that have happened, but it's a story that says, I think, a lot about where we are in business today, specifically in your business today, right, in the financial world. You mentioned that your father-in-law insists on going to the bank to actually hand deposit a check, while your 12-year-old daughter uses her phone to do the same thing. And I love that contrast, right? Because it really captures a challenge that all of us in industry have about serving different generations and how we have to be capable of meeting their needs. And so I'd love to ask, as a leader in that space, what's your advice to others about meeting customers where they are, especially when their needs and expectations are so far apart?
Yeah. Thanks for the question. It's something that we deal with as a financial institution really on a daily basis, right? Because people say, why are you guys building branches? I don't even go into a branch anymore. I can't remember the last time I was in a branch. So there's a gentle reminder in there that the business that we're in, it's still a relationship business. There's with all the AI and fintech and all the great innovations that help in all of our lives, and regardless of the industry, it is a reminder that people do business with people they like that have solutions, and it's still a people business. There's certainly automation and innovation in the back rooms and things to create efficiencies, but at the end of the day, it's critical and it's important that our bankers are pushing and touching the flesh of the clients and looking eye to eye to say, hey, I got a question here, especially when you're dealing with finance. It's a pretty sensitive topic. So, I think that, fortunately for all of us in this industry, it's still a, kind of a human connectivity with clients and prospects have a priority. And we're doing everything we can to kind of appease both ends of the spectrum, if you will. And the example you gave from somebody that is from a younger generation to somebody that's from a different generation, that we're there for everyone and everybody, regardless of the age of the individual.
But by the way, just a note, I love the parsing of language. You're referring to your father-in-law, and instead of calling him an older generation, you referred to a different generation. Good
That's
job.
right.
Way to go.
Thank you.
Nice job. Way to stay married. But you also had a great line in there that I made a note of, because we've had a lot of people who love to say that line, people do business with people they like. But you had an additional little phrase there, who have solutions.
That's right.
I think that's really important, because sometimes we think, oh, well, let's just go out and we'll be the relational person and that, but you still have to have solutions.
That's right. Yeah, you can And my grandfather actually, he kind of shared that guidance, if you will, in my youth, and it kind of stuck with me because you can hang out with somebody and go golf and go to a game or whatever and hang out. But at the end of the day, if you don't have the ability to listen and have solutions that are creating value, then that's just a buddy. But if you can combine the two and have somebody that has solutions and they're have good personalities and you get along, then you can really start a kind of a relationship.
I know looking at and reading more about you, you were born in Anaheim, California, raised in Ohio, all the way through your formative years. You're playing shortstop, pitcher on baseball teams, and you actually had a great line. You said athletics taught you hard work, perseverance, resiliency, and sense of pride. I love the first three we get all the time. Sense of pride, that was awesome. Can you take me back to a moment, maybe in a practice or a game, when, especially, let's go to sense of pride, when that quality came into play?
Yeah, there's a lot of life lessons packed into sports, and that's why we're big as a family. We're big fans of athletics because not that everybody's going to go pro, right? We know that what a difficult climb that is, but there's just a lot of life lessons packed in there that we learn from failure and perseverance, et cetera. A couple of examples, probably the best, kind of represent a sense of pride and we'll call it perseverance and hard work and all that. I'll give two academically. So I was an okay student. Didn't put much effort into it at the high school level. And it was focused on sports and all that. And when it came time to start looking at colleges, my older brother, I have two brothers. My older brother, 2 years my senior, very academic, right? Very academic, Naval Academy, Boston University, studying for his PhD currently. Um,
Wow.
I was more the well-rounded, athlete, okay student,
Nice way to put it. Well-rounded.
right?
Good.
So
There
I'm,
you go.
I'm meeting with a guidance counselor in my high school, and she goes, "Well, people like your brother go to college. Maybe you should learn a trade."
Oh,
And I'm like, "Learn a trade? Like what? Like be a electrician or something like that." So I'm kind of like getting my head around that. I loved accounting and business, so that was kind of my passion. And on my way out that meeting, kind of a little perplexed, not getting the best guidance, if you will. I saw a pamphlet for the University of Toledo Community College, and they offered an accounting degree. And I'm like, okay, let me try that. Maybe that's like a segue into this college life. So I go to the community college and start taking accounting classes, and I was getting all A's. And I'm like, because I had passion for it, I had understanding for it. I'm like, well, this is not easy, but it's certainly realistic. So then I transferred over to the main campus where I got my bachelor's and all that. So I think it was extremely gratifying, kind of understanding that, I could do a little hard work, focus academically, and then, make it into a college and graduate, on the dean's list and all that stuff. Athletically, at the same time, I was still playing baseball, but in the community college, they didn't have a junior varsity team. They only had varsity, and you had to be a student of the main campus to be a participant there. So I went to the walk-on tryouts, and there was probably about 75, 85 kids there, and it was a 3-4 day process. And I remember at the end of that, I had a pretty good workout, during those days, and they posted the names of the kids that made the team. And I'm walking up to the list of names. I can see the names taped, on the door, and I'm walking up, and the assistant coach for the team, Joey Cruzel, comes up and goes, "Where are you going?" I'm like, "Well, coach, I'm gonna go look at the names." And he goes, "Don't bother, and we'll see you at practice tomorrow." So it was his way of kind of welcoming me to the team. And so those are two really kind of points in my life, I think, that were kind of hard work, focus, kind of paid off.
now what did that teach you? What did that fight for it teach
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. And I think what's not seen, I think, is everything that was behind it. that what that moment represented. And what was behind it was all the hours in the gym hitting balls. I used to tape a strike zone on a brick wall and would throw the ball against it. And then at the same time, when the ball would come back, I would accomplish two things: pitching and hitting my marks, and then also fielding ground balls. And I could do that on my own. I didn't need to get somebody, with me at the practice facility or whatever. I was just doing it on my own. And I think having the visualization of making a Division I team was something that I wrote down. So it became a realistic goal for me. Same thing with academics. I would write my goals down. I would think about them constantly, becoming kind of obsessed with it, where every habit that I was doing was attributing to a goal of mine, whether it be academic or athletics.
Here you are at PNC today, right? It's a pretty amazing organization and unbelievable bank. You've got, as you're doing it, which of those do you find yourself relying on most in your role at PNC?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it creates a lot of thought around it, because I think it's almost like a little bit of everything. So it hasn't like crystallized where it's only one of those values stands out. There's values in uh, doing the right thing for clients, for the bank, treating people with respect internally and externally, sharing successes, with genuine appreciation, not taking credit for certain things, and highlighting the team's, their efforts. Hard work, that never goes away, but it's really exemplified through preparation, providing a value proposition to the clients. So that hard work may be understanding an industry or a particular company or an individual from a private banking perspective, what their needs are. And, so there's hard work just in different um, definitions. There's so many carryovers from athletics to the business world. Um, and that sense of hard work and discipline and competitiveness just gets repackaged, but the behaviors are very similar.
At Toledo, as we were talking about earlier, you didn't just make the baseball team; you also made the track team as a walk-on. But we've had a few walk-ons on this podcast. I love it. We actually had there's a restaurant chain called Walk-Ons. We had the founder of the restaurant chain, which is pretty. He was a walk-on basketball player at LSU. Um, the beauty of walking on to a sporting team that is what it takes, right? There's nothing promised. You're getting the scraps from the table of all those scholarship athletes. Um, but there's a grind to it that makes an impact on you forever. Um, how did the grind of going through walk-on efforts and actually in both those sports, how did that translate in when you got out and you got into the world of business?
Yeah, I think it goes back really into my youth and my wiring. So I was used to change. I moved 9 times before the age of 10. I went to 4 schools before the 6th grade. I was constantly the new kid that had to prove himself. So that walk on or that big goal in front of me kind of reminded me of that process. So I viewed the opportunity to meet new people and win them over with human hard work, ethics, athletics. That's to me, that's kind of what the grind was just having a sense of confidence, having that work ethic and drive, and it really carried over into banking. When I started out in corporate banking, I didn't know anybody, and I had to get familiar with the business owners. I had to get familiar with industries, what made them tick, what their pain points were. And I remember when I was an analyst, I worked I worked for actually 14 corporate bankers. And as an analyst, your job was really just to crunch the numbers, write your an analyst, report and be quiet and get out of the way. But I used to ask, "Hey, can I go on the appointment with you? And if you let me, you want your write up done by Thursday, I'll get it done for you by Wednesday." And they're like, "All right, but don't say anything at the appointment." I'm like, "All right." So I just wanted to absorb and listen to the questions, the flow of the dialogue. What do you say first? When do you start talking about solutions? How do you listen? And I did that over and over with all the corporate bankers. So that helped me understand the corporate grind, if you will, on how to
Yeah.
create a good presentation for the clients.
How how did the experience of being on those teams at Toledo shape the way you build and lead teams today? Is there a
Yeah.
specific team building strategy that you learned through athletics that you use at PNC today?
So I was really naturally drawn to individuals that were driven, and typically they had either a military or an athletic background. So they had a process. You know what I mean? Like they get up, they work hard, they follow up, and I'm like, okay, that's the type of people I'm drawn to, from a commercial or corporate banking perspective.
I'm going to flip that question that you were debating with your wife when you were looking at this, right? If someone doesn't have the same work ethic, how do I manage them?
You know,
What now I understand the idea that you go looking for that in the hiring process, but sometimes that,
yeah,
sometimes we miss. I mean, heck, even Jesus was only 11 for 12, right? I mean, he picked one bad disciple. But the end result is like, how do you manage someone that is that doesn't bring what you value most to the
yeah.
workplace?
Yeah, it was really a maturation process as me as a younger manager at the time. And what I tried to do was understand that everybody's wired differently.
Mhm.
It's not like do what Cressman does because that's the winning recipe. It's kind of like what are you good at? And how is me as a leader, how can I make you the best you possible? And there's all kinds of answers to that based on the individual. There's some commonality, of course, with everybody. But to me, the big challenge was if I had 15, 20 bankers, like said, I had a good relationship with every single one of them. And how can I make Don the best? How can I make Cressman the best? How can I make so and so the best? Yeah. And that was something that was kind of learned. It wasn't natural to kind of think that way. And what I saw was uh, people were receptive to that compared to me saying, "This is the way it is." Get on board or get out. It was kind of like, "Hey, I like what you did here. Walk me through this. Why did you do that?" And then let them come to the solutions themselves. And that way it was more sustainable.
Yeah, I love that. That's some good advice there too. Um, after college, you played some semi-pro baseball, which I think is kind of fun.
Yeah.
But it wasn't very long before a scout actually said something to you that might have been a tinge painful, but at the same time, it changed the path for you. Tell us the story.
Yeah. So I was invited to play in a semi-pro team in Orlando. I called it the Island of Misfit Toys because we all were Division I players that didn't get drafted. So there's something wrong with all of us, and they're kind of poking
Right.
us with sticks, trying to figure
Because
it out.
that's back when the Major League Draft had like 100 rounds too.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was, uh, it was a good opportunity for this kid out of Ohio, that didn't have a lot of connections and all that. So there's a lot of, life lessons in there. And there's two memories of that. So my coach at Toledo, Coach Sanders, actually said to me after my fall season, which I thought I did pretty good. I was being competitive, I was working hard, and all that. And he asked me to come see him, and I'm thinking, oh, this is great. He's gonna maybe give me a little scholarship or talk about how he's gonna utilize me, more innings and all this. And he sat me down and he goes, "Hey, I want to, you have a very a high drive, great passion, work ethic, and I wish I can take that out of you and put it into every player on this team." And just complimenting on that. I'm just saying, okay, that's good. And he goes, "But I need your spot, and we're gonna let you go." And and I said, "Well, what?" I thought, this and that, and kind of going back and forth a little bit. He goes, "Hey, listen, Cressman, you're going to be successful in whatever you do in life. I can tell." And I said, "Everything but baseball?" And he goes, "Yeah, everything but baseball." Kind of laughed about it, and it was a kind of a critical point for me. So anyway, so I'm working out in his team in Orlando. We played at the old Tinker Field, where the Red Sox were at,
Yep.
right by the Citrus Bowl, and I was playing. I was converted to center field at that point, and scouts would come to these games and invite you to their open camps. So every game we'd have 3 or 4 guys, that are at the bottom of the barrel from a scouting perspective. And I'd say, "Hey, you want to come out, work out with us?" And this is in 92. So the Rockies and the Marlins were expansion teams. And I'm telling my then girlfriend, now wife, Nicole, and I'm like, "Oh, this is going to be easy. They got to fill out rookie ball teams, single A, probably 2 or 3 single A teams." I go, "They're going to be starved for kids." And I go, "This is going to be, I'm going to get signed. Watch this." So I'm working out with this team from with the Rockies actually, and I have a pretty good. They do like inter squad scrimmages with the rookie ball team, and sprinkle in a couple of us and see how we perform. And he comes after the game. I think I did okay. Got a hit or two, threw somebody out. Felt pretty good about myself. And he goes, "All right, Cressman." He goes, "Yeah, we'll be in touch." And I said, "All right." And I started to walk away, and I was only like 2 kids that they kept out of like 30, 40 kids for that scrimmage. I turn around and I go, "Hey," I go, "what are you looking for?" And he goes, "Oh," he goes, "Well, we rate everybody 1 to 5 in running, throwing, and hitting." And I go, "Where do you have me at?" He goes, "You're a 5+ on running." He goes, "You're a 4 in throwing, and you're a 3 in hitting." He goes, "You're not going to make it. So go cry at a pillow and go get a real job." And this is your very
Go cry
stereotypical,
in a pillow.
"Go cry at a pillow and go get a real effing job," is what his exact words were.
And by the way, we're talking about the Rockies, who
Yeah.
today in Major League Baseball are
Okay.
9-50, right?
Right.
They're getting ready to set an all-time. Anyway,
Yeah.
I know that's many years ago, but still,
Yeah.
I'm thinking,
So
right.
it
I
was,
hope that guy isn't the manager. Is still in their manager system.
yeah. But it was a profound statement because he was being honest with me, but I thought he was being a jerk. So a week later, I'm working out with the Royals in Haines City. Similar type of thing. They kept 1 or 2 of us. I do a scrimmage, and the guy said, "Oh, we'll be in touch." I turn around, I go, "Hey, how do you have me ranked?" He goes, 543. I go, "Am I going to make it?" He goes, "Nope." So and it was towards the end of the season. So for me, it was I had to drive back from Orlando back up to Cleveland, Ohio, and this is in 1992. So you didn't have XM radio, you didn't have podcast. It was complete silence in my car for that 20-hour drive, and I'm going through, what am I going to do with my life? And now what? And I kind of put the baseball at rest, and I felt pretty good about it. From a kid
So in that drive, you were able to put baseball behind you.
yeah. I
Wow.
came to terms with it, and I wasn't mad or, I really felt like I gave it my all, and I would never have any regrets looking back on, "Oh, I should have played that semi-pro team, or I should have went to that tryout." I did all of it. So I felt, that I've exhausted that, and there was a lot of good lessons learned along the way that set me up for preparation for banking and to being a professional.
Research shows that 80% of us believe we have a book within us, but the number of people who follow through and do the work to create that book is far, far less. The reason is that the process can seem so overwhelming, and that is why I have partnered with Forbes Books to make the process easier for those of you who listen to this podcast and believe you have a story in you. So if you're ready to turn your leadership experience into your legacy, start your journey with us today at Forbes Books. Visit forbesbooks.com/Don to get started. There are a lot of us who struggle sometimes with closure, right? When we're moving from one thing, I mean, and it may just be, frankly, one job to the next. I know I struggled with it when I left Sports Illustrated, even though it was my choice. I still, my wife gave me a hard time because for the next year, my voicemail still said, "This is Don Yeager at Sports Illustrated," because it was part of my identity. Baseball was part of your identity. What was there something you learned in that clearing of that closure moment that you might offer me as a point of advice?
Yeah, I think change is inevitable, right? And the fear of change is that you're worse off than you currently are. But when you know that you're going to be better, you embrace change. All of us as people do that. Like if you're going to be guaranteed a better job or life or scenario, yeah, you'll embrace that. And the fear is when you don't know. So for me, it was really there's change coming, and what are you going to do about it? You can't control. I always focused in on things I can control. I can't control, Coach Sanders or the Rockies scout or anything else, but I can control what I do with this new information. Yeah, my dreams of being a professional, athlete were at an end, right? And now what are you going to do with your life? And I remember my mother-in-law said to me when I was at the kitchen table, kind of setting out resumes, she was like, "What are you looking to do?" And I'm like, "Well, I want to get into accounting or finance or something." And she goes, "Oh, I got a high school classmate that's a banker. He's at KeyBank in Cleveland. His name is Robert Heisler. He goes by Yank because his birthday's on the 4th of July. Look him up." So I drive to the library, get the annual report, and he's on the front cover. He's the
Oh, wow.
executive. He's an executive vice chairman. So I called 1-800-KeyBank and I asked to speak with Mr. Heisler. I get transferred to his administrator, Mr. Heisler's office. And I said, "Hi, this is Cressman Bronson. I'd like to speak with Mr. Heisler." She paused, and my very sophisticated name confuses people sometimes, and she said,
You do sound like an oil tycoon or something.
exactly, right? I'm just
Right.
this kid that can't hit a curveball. And she goes, "Do you have an appointment?" And I said, "No, ma'am." I said, "But tell him that Connie Hart, that's my mother-in-law, his high school classmate." I go, "Tell him Connie Hart says hello, and I need 15 minutes of his time." She goes, "Hang on." She comes back a few minutes later. She goes, "He'll see you. Come back up next Tuesday, and we'll see you at 3:00. So I get my J.C. Penney, blue suit on. I get my Honda Accord with 150,000 miles on it. And I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to pay for the $8 parking, when I'm going into the KeyBank building to meet with Mr. Heisler. So I go up there. We have a brief conversation. I'm telling him about, what I want to do. He goes, "You seem like a good kid. Go get sales experience and come back in a year." I said, "Okay." So I'm going down the elevator and I'm like, what am I supposed to sell? Like furniture or cars? Or I'm trying to figure out this riddle. And I'm like, you know what? No one's hiring anybody. I'm going to go get my Series 6, 63 insurance license, and I'm going to go work for State Street Research and MetLife. So I get the interview, and they said, "Do you want salary or commission?" I'm like, "I have no idea what I'm doing. I'll take the salary." So I was getting $800 a month, $400 every 2 weeks. And I learned a lot. So I applied a soft sales approach when setting up meetings. I'd say if I was calling you, I'd say, "Mr. Yeager, let me start by apologizing for the interruption. I know you're probably just coming home from a hard day at work. And the last person you want to talk to is somebody about investments or insurance. But, at some point in your life, it's going to become a topic for you. And when it does, I'd just like you to think about me." And if it's okay, is it all right if I call you back in 2 or 3 months, check on you, see how you're doing? That was it. And I 90% of the time, people are like, yeah, sure, whatever, and hang up. And then I'd write in my daily planner, call back Don Yeager in, at the end of August. And I call you back. And once I called somebody 2 or 3, 4 times, I started getting appointments. So I was very successful. I brought in like 100 new relationships in a year, but I was getting 800 hours a month. So I went to my manager at MetLife and I said, hey, he's like, oh, you're doing great. And I said, oh, yeah, thanks. I go, I'm starved to death. I got no money. And I go, I need to flip over to commission. And he goes, well, you signed a 2-year agreement. So next
Oh,
year you're going to be doing great. I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to make it to next year. I can't afford to buy lunch. And Nicole and I were getting ready to get married. And I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm going to call Yank back. So I called Yank back, set up another meeting. And I said, Mr. Heisler, this is what I learned. Value proposition, preparation, resiliency, follow up, all that stuff. And he goes, all right. He goes, you're going to interview for the corporate training program. There was 75 kids applying for 5 positions. And everybody had much shinier college educations than me. And my
Toledo wasn't a shiny. Come on, I'm a Mid-American Conference guy too, right?
yeah,
We need more love.
yeah, there was Ivy Leaguers in there, Notre Dame, all these great schools, and my confidence was a little wavering. I'm like, geez, I don't know if I'm going to make it, but I got the position, and it's kind of a funny story. I was in my office with MetLife in Independence, Ohio, and out my window I could see downtown Cleveland. It's snowy out, and I'm talking to Nicole, who's making Christmas presents, like Christmas wreaths, because we have no money, right? So she's making Christmas gifts for everybody. And I get a call, and it's a 216, Cleveland area code. I'm like, God, it's probably might be a client or whatever. Let me call you back. I pick up the phone, and it was Kimberly Robinson from KeyBank Human Resources, and I'm getting geared up to listen to the rejection speech that I've heard 50 times before. And she goes, well, I'm calling to make you an offer. We want to get you in a corporate banking program. It pays 28,000 a year. And I did, for whatever reason, I didn't respond in a positive way. I said, thanks, Kimberly. I'm looking at a couple of different offers. I'll let you know. And I hang up and I call, and I'm like, I don't know what I did. So I called Nicole back and I'm like, you're not going to believe this, almost in tears of the jubilation. She goes, what did you say? And I said, I told her I'd think about it and call her back. She goes, you call her back right now and tell her you accept this position. So I hung up and called her, Kimberly Robinson, back. And I said, I am in. So that's how I got into the world of finance.
I love it. Kimberly Robinson was kind of like that assistant coach at Toledo, right? That said, "Hey, kid, you've made the
Yeah,
team.
right.
Don't worry about it. Show up for practice tomorrow." I love the idea that you took his advice and you went and found some opportunity to create sales experience. Maybe not naturally. I could imagine a few, but what advice would you give someone
Sure.
younger?
I think what Yank appreciated was, here's this 22-year-old kid that worked his way to his office through the phone by leveraging a connection with
Right.
with his classmate. So that showed something special. My competition were just really, smart finance kids, but they didn't have that wiring of prospecting or being creative and all that. So I think that, what it taught me was everybody's just a person, right? We all have a story. We all have a past. And if you're able to connect with somebody, it'll get people's attention, right? And it'll separate you from your own competition, whatever that may be, not in a negative, aggressive way, but just as a standout. And I didn't fully appreciate at the time, but when I got into leadership, I'm like, I want to be an executive like Yank was, that
Mm.
recognizes certain attributes in certain people. But we all got a break from somebody. Right? If you talk to every single professional athlete or professional individual, somebody gave you a break at some point in time, took, kind of bet on you. And I want to make sure that myself and my managers, my leadership, identify that talent, take a bet on some individuals, give them opportunities. I mentor several people every year and kind of rotate those out every year or two. And I'm like, sign up for things that no one else wants to sign up for. You know, volunteer, do things, go out of their way to make a name for yourself, to create that internal brand, in the banking world. And that really attribute can be unplugged in any industry and plugged back in.
I love that line. We all got a break from somebody, right? Somebody took a bet on you. By the way, I assume you've stayed in touch with Yank.
Yeah, Yank passed away unfortunately a few years ago, but yeah, he was one of those guys. He golfed at Harvard. Came from a small town in Ravenna, Ohio, and just has a great story. And kind of worked his way through the community banks, and then worked his way up through Key Bank. And I owe a lot to him and a lot of executives, even at PNC, giving me an opportunity to create a corporate bank. They didn't have to do that. I didn't have any experience doing that. The executives in Pittsburgh saw something in me that said, "Yeah, this is the guy." And even though if I didn't believe it myself, they did. And it's a gentle reminder. I wouldn't be anywhere without those individuals giving it,
Wow.
kind of betting.
We talked a lot here about connection, obviously, and the importance of relationships, from the very first question on. But one of the things your grandfather once told you, I saw this, was people have two ears and one mouth for a reason, right? In the world of connection, the art of listening, the value, the importance of listening is sometimes lost. How do you how do you teach that to other people? If you're coaching someone today who's trying to grow in their career, you talk about mentoring others. How do you teach them to listen better?
Yeah, and I think that's where the trust comes, right? Because if you go in, not to pick on any industry, but sometimes when you go in, um, you know, buy a car or get life insurance, it's all about what the sales guy is saying to you. You need to do this, and this is and that is not well received typically. And so the ability to ask questions and listen shows, the client that you have their best interest in mind comparative to my own personal interest. Like, oh, if I close this deal, I get a 2% commission, and this is gonna be great for me versus, Don, tell me about, what you're looking to do with your personal wealth. Like, what are your plans philanthropically or for, with your family members and college? And, when you start asking those types of questions, there's a genuineness about it, which makes that connection, professionally, and say, you know what? I like this relationship because they have my best interest in mind comparative to the product of the week or something like that. So I think it's critical to have that foundational ability to ask questions and listen before you rush to the solution. We all know what the solution is, like 30 seconds in, but if you shove it down their throat and then it's resisted, you're not going to get anywhere. However, if you lead that person down the path and then, you come up with a solution and they come up with the solution on their own, then it's more sustainable.
I want to ask kind of one last question. It's one we've been really going through with a few folks lately. A lot of leaders today are faced with real challenges around turnover, right? I mean, it's people switch jobs today more freely than ever. When you're building out, as you are, the marketplace and all the amazing things you're doing for PNC down there in South Florida, what have you found to be most effective in keeping your team engaged and reducing that churn? What are the intentional things you're doing to build a culture that people want to stay as part of?
Yeah, so there's two levels of that answer, right? So the top one is everything that Bill Demchak, our CEO, and the executive committees are doing for PNC. The decisions that we make create a culture that's very positive and sustainable. Our key line marketing ad is brilliantly boring since
Yeah,
1865.
I love
There's a
that
lot
line.
there's a lot packed in there. And it just means that, we're delivering really good solutions, locally. Um, we stay, very in the fairway with our decisions. We don't do anything flashy. We're just kind of the grassroots and that embraces within the business community for sure. But so that we're at a tremendous advantage of the PNC brand and reputation that makes our jobs a little easier, if you will, to bring it down to a local level, like in South Florida. So, but there has to be consistency, right? So I try to emulate what the executive committee is doing and Bill Demchek's vision is in PNC Pittsburgh, right down here in South Florida. So it's we got the brand. We give back to the communities in meaningful ways. Part of my responsibilities are to chair the PNC Foundation for South Florida. So we're deeply invested into that success. So, and as a company, we encourage everybody to bring their whole self to work, where you're respected and you can thrive in your career. We're a growth company, so we're expanding new markets so people can navigate their careers. We provide education and licenses for our employees. There's a lot of transparency on career paths, and so it's a very good environment, and we have a lot of investment in solutions. So all the bankers have the very top sophisticated solutions that they can offer their clients. So to me, it's like this whole perfect mixture of culture and opportunity.
What a your company might be brilliantly boring, right? But this conversation was brilliant and anything but boring for me. I'm grateful for the lessons. I'm grateful for the pages of notes that I took here. And I thank you today for being a corporate competitor with us.
Well, Don, thank you for the opportunity. I really enjoy meeting you, having this conversation, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
I had a great time. I hope you did too. Cressman, what a fantastic interview. But I took four great takeaways from that conversation today, and I hope these four will resonate with you. The first is I loved his line: "People do business with people they like, dot, 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 who have solutions." What an important point. It's not just about being liked, and we all want to work on that, but we have to make sure we're bringing solutions to those we're seeking to do business with. I loved his line: if you don't have a solution, you're just a buddy, and that's pretty awesome too. The second takeaway I got was that conversation he had with that Colorado Rockies scout, who after he put everything into it that he had, the scout basically said, "No, your future is not here in baseball. Go cry on your pillow and get a real job." Boy, that sounds so brutal, but at the same time, Crespin ultimately came to recognize that 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 scout actually spoke truth to him, and that's a real value, and we need to accept that when it comes our way. And he was able to come to terms with that change in his career path because he believed that he gave it his all and he played through the end. And that's pretty awesome. My third was his decision to call Yank and the way that he did it. What a great story. But that line that he had at the end: "We all get a break from someone who takes a bet on you." But once somebody does that, make sure to reward that bet and stay in touch with them. And I'm so glad that he did in both cases. And then finally, this idea of his coaching these little league teams and opening the conversation with their parents by saying, "I'm going to teach your kid how to play baseball, but more importantly, I'm going to teach your kid how to deal with failure." What an opening line, but so valuable because you also immediately set the standard. What is baseball, by the way? It's a failure sport. So what a great way to discuss what it is that they are going to be experiencing. Cressman Bronson was a fantastic conversation, a fantastic benefit into my life today, and I hope he was for you as well. I appreciate you.